Thanks, Marcus. Thanks for having a chat. Um, I'll get you to start. The first question I'll get you to start. Just tell me where you're from and what group you're part of.
My name's Marcus Nolly. I'm currently the chairman of the Apollo Bay Fishermen's Cooperative. I've been a commercial fisherman for over 10 years for Southern Rock Lobster. I've also been quite involved as an industry advocate. So I was also the chairman of Seafood Industry Victoria and president of the Victorian Rock Lobster Association. So over the last 10 years or so, we've had a lot of engagement with the oil and gas industry at varying levels of success. So we've got quite a lot of exposure and experience, and suffice to say, it's been a very frustrating journey.
Yeah, wow. I can imagine. No, it'd be great to hear a bit more about your experience. So you're obviously a fisherman. What is your connection to the ocean, and what led you down that path?
Well, I've had a sort of a lifelong love of the ocean. I was always brought up down the coast. From when I was very young, we had a holiday house at Anglesey. Then we've had houses we built a house at Jarosite Road at Bells Beach on the edge of the Ironbark Basin. Absolutely beautiful. We've since had our own holiday houses along the Great Ocean Road, Fairhaven, and now here we are at Apollo Bay, and that's where we are. I've always been on, in, or under the ocean in some way, shape, or form. I'm definitely a water person, an ocean person. I'm not real comfortable about being too far inland. I don't like that. I like being near the sea. It's the natural place for me. We've myself and my wife Pauline, we've had lots of adventures on the sea. Many years ago, we actually had a boat and sailed the east coast of Australia for a good couple of years, and that really sort of cemented our love of the ocean and the environment. And then I got involved in commercial fishing as a way of actually being able to spend time on the ocean and around the ocean, but actually make it cost a bit less if I could earn a bit of money while I was doing it. That was a really fascinating period of my life, because I got quite heavily involved in the science side of ocean management. So commercial fisheries in all around Australia, really, and Victoria is no different. It's quite a heavily managed and regulated environment activity, commercial fishing, which is a good thing. In the bad old days, fishermen would just go and take what they wanted from the ocean, and there wasn't much of a care for sustainability. They didn't really know what they were doing. The ocean just seemed like such a vast, endless source of resources. But of course, that wasn't the case. And as we've known from all around the world, fishing pressure can have devastating impacts on the environment, and also it's a very complicated space. All the trophic interactions of the species, in the oceanic environment, it's a very sensitive and complicated environment. So I got a lot of insight into fisheries management and the science behind it, in terms of stock assessments, modelling, and better understanding the impacts of activities in the oceanic environment. So it was only a natural segue for us to get involved with the oil and gas industry, because, of course, they like us, we're looking to access oceanic resources and operate, in this shared environment, and it is a shared environment. So we have to, we all need to do the right thing. And it became very apparent that with the oil and gas industry, they didn't play by the same rules at all, and had no care for the impacts that they were having, and no interest in even finding out what those impacts were. So I actually now draw a very close analogy between the tobacco industry and the oil and gas industry. The tobacco industry for years, smoking was good for you. That was the mantra. And slowly, the science came in, and we know what we know now. I think for the oil and gas industry, the clock's ticking. It's a gold rush. They're just going to grab what they can while they can. And quite frankly, they don't give a damn what they do while they're at it.
Yeah, absolutely. We can see now that they're going for broke, and it's up to, I guess, communities like us to sort of stop them in their tracks before it's too late. But they know that the pressure's on them, and they can feel it because of all the work that we're doing. So it's good to know that pressure's working. And yeah, you're right. The ocean obviously was regarded as just a dumping ground. Like we could throw whatever we needed to at it for such a long time, but it obviously got to a point where we realized that wasn't the case. And the effects are really showing now. What sort of interactions have you had with the oil and gas industry over the past few years, and what led you down that sort of pathway?
Well, initially it was sort of a forced engagement because they were seeking to operate in the same areas that we were operating, so there was going to be a clash of use at certain times. So really, the first serious interactions that we had were because they had to initiate those interactions because of the regulatory regime. So NOPSEMA is the national overlord of what goes on, and so they've got processes that the oil and gas industry proponents have to go through, including engaging with what they define as relevant people. So, it's just another little example. There's 1,000 of these little examples of where the system is stacked in their favour, but things like that. So they get to decide who's relevant and therefore who they have to engage with in order to get through the process of, consultation that then is an input into their environmental plan. So NOPSEMA, they have to put a plan together. They need to demonstrate that they've consulted with relevant people. They need to do risk assessments of what their declaration of risks because of their activities are in the environment. They get to evaluate those risks. They then, through a very curious, again, part of the process, that it's up to them to then mitigate or reduce those risks to as low as practically possible. But that's it's called ALARP, as low as reasonably possible or whatever. But that's their determination. So, and that's largely driven by finance, not environmental impact. So in other words, the underlying presumption is that this activity is going to go ahead. Going through this process is just, it's just ticking boxes. It's part of what the facade of making it look like there's a very strict regime around what they do, which is all a complete farce. And they just go through the process. So we got dragged into that year after year after year by different proponents who would come along, want to do the same sort of things. They needed to engage with us, and we were dragged through it again and again and again and again. We sort of were suffering from consultation fatigue. It was very confusing. We didn't even know, is it this proponent or this project? Are these guys that want to talk to us the same as the ones that have already talked to us, or is this someone new? There were in space and time, there were overlapping proposals of activity. It was a real nightmare, and taking an awful lot of our time to engage with them to help them complete their environmental plans to then go ahead and do what they wanted to do.
Tick the box.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. So we started sort of arcing up about that. We certainly made our concerns known to the regulator, NOPSEMA, and we've sort of started forcing these guys to the table. We started to get them having conversations around compensation, not just for fishers, but actually remediation for the environment, for the damage that they do. If they were doing this sort of activity on the land, they would actually have to post remediation bonds. So like if you were doing exploration on the land, and you went into an area and you dug a mine out and took resources out, you couldn't just walk away from it. You'd have to then fill it up or landscape it or replant trees and do your best to remediate the damage you've done. None of that exists in the ocean. The presumption is that it's a benign activity, and as we now know, that's just not the case.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so right. And it's kind of like it's out of sight, out of mind as well. Most people don't see what's happening. Most people don't know about it. And I guess they've been able to just do what they want and get away with it for such a long time.
Yeah, and don't forget too, some of these people are pretty faceless, the ones where you have the best opportunity and success in engagement are those who actually have some sort of retail presence in Australia. So Origin Energy, for example, our most successful engagement was with them. You know, it's since become Beach Energy, or God knows what they are now. But the reason for that is that, you know, they knew that if they got things wrong, there could be a consumer backlash against them, because they were a retailer of energy products, you know, here in Australia. Others who are just data collection, you know, multinational data collection, geoscience engineering companies, they couldn't give a shit, you know. I mean, no one knows who they are. They don't actually operate here. You know, there's no lingering obligation for them to be nice or build a, you know, social license or have a relationship with the community. They don't care. They're just in and out, you know. And as you say, preferably you don't even know they're there, because they're over the out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think TGS, who are the proponents proposing to do the big project, I think that they would have assumed that they would have gotten in out of sight, out of mind. They're as required by NOPSEMA, they had to post an advertisement in the local newspaper, and I think there was a little, what was it, little ad in the advertising section of the Apollo Bay newspaper, and that was to notify the community that this was happening. And I assume that they would have thought that they would have gotten in and out without no one really noticing, but that's obviously not been the case. Hey.
Well, that's the thing, and that's what they want. I mean, they don't come and do these engagements because they want to, or they are genuinely interested in any feedback. They're doing it because, you know, they have to write in their report that they've done it and give evidence that they've done it, and they just want to move on. Look, this latest attempt by TGS was so appalling. I felt like we'd wound the clock back, you know, a good decade. And the shameful thing was just how little effort they made. I mean, for that particular engagement, you know, I didn't see any advertising for them other than what came out directly by email, because I'm a, you know, relevant person. You know, I didn't see any local advertising. When they were here, there was no signage, there was no effort for anything, and there was certainly no interest or effort in actually gathering any feedback or comments. No one. I had a lengthy conversation with the people who were there. They weren't interested in anything I had to say. I mean, no one took any notes. There was no feedback form I could fill out. You know, they couldn't answer my questions at all. In fact, it was quite hilarious. I was variously told by the guy I was talking to there, basically, you know, he admitted, he said, "Oh no, this is not consultation." He said, "This is just a drop-in." I said, well, that's interesting, because that's not what NOPSEMA's looking for.
So, yeah, I guess going back a bit, how do you feel about all the proposals for seismic blasting for gas exploration, gas expansion in the Otway Basin at the moment? The International Energy Agency, the IPCC, all said back in 2021, 3 years ago, that we can't have any new coal or gas if we're to reach our net zero targets and limit global heating. But the Australian government seems to be ignoring this. They're saying we need gas as part of the transition. Everyone knows we export 80% of our gas anyway. So how do you feel about what they're saying about, you know, needing the gas out of the Otway Basin and all these projects?
Well, it's just really sad, is all I can say. And it's illustrative of just how much power the lobbyists for this industry are in Canberra. Because, as you said, the IPCC has made it very clear that if globally we're all going to meet our targets, there should be no new, you know, no new releases of oil and gas exploration or fields. They've also said, which is fascinating, you know, everyone's signed up to the Paris Accord and everyone's making their commitments, you know, and that's generally agreed that everyone, you know, countries are having varying success in making the transition, but, you know, everyone's agreed that these are the targets. Well, the IPCC has also said there's enough gas right now globally to facilitate the transition if everyone's serious about it. So the IPCC has said there should be no new fields opening up. They've also said there's enough gas currently available. And guess what? Geoscience Australia, the Australian government's own arm that annually produces an energy report, almost like a report card of the state of energy in Australia. If you read that, there's more than enough gas currently available for another 50 years to meet all obligations and all requirements. 50 years. So both internationally and with by the own Australian government's agency, there is acknowledgement that there is no need for new oil fields, gas fields, and exploration. That's the science says that. So what on earth is Madeleine King doing and the government doing in bending over backwards when they're pushed by these lobbyists and oil and gas companies who are just in a wild west rush to just, whilst they still can, they just want to get, as much out of the ground as they can. And don't forget, Australia is hopeless in even, getting any benefit, as a resource for our communities, because we don't tax it properly. So, regardless of whether you think it's a good or a bad thing, we're just giving it away. So no wonder these companies want to come to Australia and get as much action as they can, because it's just so lucrative. They make so much money, and they don't care about targets, and they don't care about global warming. I mean, of course they don't. It's just how much money can we make? It's as simple as that. So the whole thing is just built on it's like a house of cards, and it's full of lies. And I just, how can these politicians in Canberra sleep at night? How can they say in front of the public with a straight face, oh yeah, we need this stuff, when their own agencies tell them we don't, and internationally they tell us we don't? I mean, it's an embarrassment. I'm embarrassed for them. I think it's a disgrace.
Yeah. Wow. Very powerful. It's it can be very frustrating, hey, and it makes you angry when you think, for example, the Labor government got elected on the basis of climate action. The Morrison government had were pushing forward with the gas-led recovery, and now this new future gas strategy is just pretty much the same thing, just repackaged with a new name. And you kind of go, what's going on here? Who really controls these politicians? And it's obvious that the gas industry has a stronghold over them. But that's why I think it's really important for us to be having these conversations and to be doing the community sort of work that we're doing and spreading that awareness. And people are starting to realize now, like, hey, there was some great videos by Richard Dennis from the Australia Institute talking about the Australian government makes more money from HECS, from student universities, than the petroleum resource rent tax in the gas industry. And everyone's like, this is crazy, this is rigged, this is ridiculous. So yeah, why do you think it is, do you think it is important that communities continue to speak out against this and sort of build relationships, different groups to build relationships with each other? And do you think it's important that we keep putting on the pressure, and what sort of impact do you think that will have positively?
Look, well, the answer is yes. Of course, we have to keep the pressure up. Of course, various groups have to work together. All politicians are just flags. They will blow with wherever the breeze is blowing, right? And their primary interest, regardless of what they say, is to stay in power. So at the end of the day, you don't really see much more. We used to have what were conviction politicians. Politicians who really believed in what's best for Australia and best for the people, and they would act accordingly. You really don't see that much anymore. Most of the politicians now are career politicians whose job it is to be a politician. So they just want to stay in their job. So they're trying to please everyone all the time and are constantly walking this tightrope. The more real people on the ground who are real voters, the more that we build awareness amongst those people of these facts. These are not sort of ideological perspectives. They're facts, facts that are published by the government's own agencies and organisations, facts that are economic hard facts. The example you just gave with the HECS debt and the PRT tax, that's a disgrace. I mean, we've literally, my wife has written letters to, Madeleine King. And trust me, I've visited, many years ago, I did a national seafood industry leadership course. And we went to Canberra and met with politicians to get sort of the inside running on what works if you want to have your voice heard, and what works if you're trying to engage with politicians. And the insiders in Canberra said, do not underestimate the power of writing a letter to a member of parliament. You know, they, first of all, those letters do get read. I'm not talking sort of, you know, just form letters where people sign them and send them off, but something written in your own voice. You know, those letters do matter. They all do get read, and they do make a difference, because they know that for every one person who can be bothered to write that letter, and when I say letter, it can be an email, but for every person who can be bothered to do that, you know, there is politically probably another 1,000 behind them who are thinking the same thing. So all the pollsters and the advisors, you know, they're the ones who are keeping an eye on you know, what is the sentiment, what's the mood in the electorate, and so it does make a difference. You know, at the end of the day, if enough people are outraged enough by this nonsense, and they make that known, not straight through the ballot box, but actually by writing letters into the MPs' offices, trust me, that really makes a difference. So I think one of the most powerful things that can be done, in addition to communication and advocacy, is to really empower people. People get fed up and give up and think it doesn't matter. But I think making sure that people know it does matter is really important, you know, and start with your local MP, because your local MP is, you know, it's their job to listen. So, you know, they're obliged to. So start there and work your way up the chain. But you know, if we can get more people doing that, those messages will be heard in Canberra.
Yep, absolutely. Love that. I love the wind blowing, the flag blowing in the wind analogy. That's classic, and it's absolutely true. And that's something that I try and tell everyone all the time, especially when we're doing our events and stuff like that, is we vote the politicians in. We are the ones that give them their power. So we have the say, and, you know, they follow public opinion, and we've got to create that public opinion. That's why it's important to write letters, pick up the phone, call your politicians, call your elected representatives, and all that sort of stuff. And I guess people really do underestimate the power of it and think that I'm just one person, what impact am I going to have? But, you know, lots of smalls make a big, and that's how you make.
Yeah, look, it's really true. And as I say, you know, it's easy to be sort of, you know, feel a bit helpless and, you know, get a bit sort of worn out by the whole thing. But, you know, it's a numbers game, you know, and the politicians will shamelessly acknowledge that. I mean, that's why we've struggled as commercial fishers. You know, we're such a small group now that the politicians, they know they don't have to listen to us, because, you know, they don't care. We're only a handful of votes. You know, take, for example, some of the decisions made by the Labor government in Victoria, you know, to shut down sustainable commercial fishing in Port Phillip Bay in Melbourne. You know, all the scientists agreed that the fishing that was being done there was more than sustainable. The outtake of fish at that time, before all the bans were put in place, was only 10% of what the scientists said was a sustainable catch. So it was a really light touch, but it was providing, you know, fresh seafood for consumers. Because don't forget, the fish in the water is a crown resource. The job of the fisherman is to go and get that fish and bring it to you. It's your fish, right? But if you're not a recreational fisher, you know, or you're unable to go fishing, how do you get access to your fish? You know, well, the answer is you don't. You have to wind up buying an imported fish from somewhere else whose fisheries management is dubious at best. So you, the consumer, are denied access to your fish as you shut down local sustainable commercial fishing. And the politicians totally acknowledge that. They say, yep, our decisions are not, we know what the science says, but we don't care. There's more votes over here because there's more recreational fishers around these sandbelt suburbs. And so we will shamelessly make this decision, and you guys can get fucked. And there's more votes in it for us over here. And they've told that to our face, you know. So it's all about numbers, you know. The more people that make their feelings known to our elected representatives, the better. You know, just because the flag's blowing this way today doesn't mean it can't blow the other way tomorrow.
Yep, absolutely. And interesting, I didn't know that about Port Phillip Bay. I actually work in tourism out in the Bay. So I sort of started a fair while after a lot of the commercial fishing licenses ended, but I didn't know that story. So that's really interesting. But a lot of people get really sort of down and depressed at the speed and the rate, or the speed at which things are changing and things are happening, and feel like people can feel hopeless. But I think one thing that you can never predict is the change or the speed that politics will change, and it can just change overnight. And I think that's incredible. I might go a little bit into the monster mammoth proposal that is TGS and Schlumberger at the moment. So TGS and Schlumberger have the proposal to seismic blast 49,000 square kilometers of the Otway Basin. That size area has changed multiple times. So going back to community advocacy and pressure, this proposal was first 7.7 million hectares, and then it got shrunk down to 5.5 million hectares because of the public pressure. And now it's at 49,000 square kilometers, which I don't know what is in hectares. It's just been changing so much. But, this is massive, and it's been coined as the largest seismic blasting proposal ever anywhere in the world. It's almost the size of Tasmania. TGS recently did some consultation. I'll put in quotation. It was very poor consultation. It was a box ticking exercise. How did you feel throughout that consultation process, and sort of how did you feel as a relevant person, as a commercial fisherman and relevant in the community? Do you feel like you were adequately consulted, and how did you feel they sort of conducted their whole process?
No, not at all. And as I say, we've been dealing with similar proposals and similar entities for many years now. Others that know that there is some impact of the quality of their consultation will make more of an effort. These guys made none. They were trying to fly under the radar as much as possible. We even told them early on. We told them, and we told NOPSEMA, if these guys are sincere about wanting to consult and actually get feedback, then these are the sorts of things you should be doing in a place like Apollo Bay. You should come here and spend a decent amount of time here. You should actually have public hall meetings where you and your experts get up on a stage and explain what you're doing to the community in a manner that allows them to listen and then ask questions in front of everyone and let them explain themselves. There's no way known that they wanted to do that, and they certainly didn't do it. Their approach to, it's not consultation, and as they literally even told me, I said, this isn't consultation. And Dan, if that was that guy, he said, no. He said, this is not consultation. It's just a drop-in, that's all it is. So there was no intention to consult, so it's not, we can't even talk about the quality of the consultation. By their own admission, they were not consulting. They were just telling. They said, this is what we're going to do. So right from the get-go, there was no genuine intention to consult. There is no evidence that they have consulted. There's the test. Go back to NOPSEMA or even go to TGS and ask them, what did you learn from the community during that consultation? Nothing. The answer is nothing. They didn't learn anything. They don't have... As I said, there was no feedback forms. I had an extensive conversation with this Dan and the other woman who was there. Neither of them lifted a pen. Neither of them made one note. All they did was try and deflect the questions that I was asking. So, it's a bit hard to even say what was the consultation like. There wasn't any, and there is no evidence of any. And I challenge them to prove, other than recording the fact that they walked through a city. You show me that there was consultation. There hasn't been.
Yeah, you're so right, and that's how we felt all throughout this process as well. We had, well, it seems evident that the reason TGS came back, they had a couple online webinars where they gave everyone a bit of an overview of the project and gave us time for asking questions. The question time, we had our cameras blacked out, our microphones turned off. We had to put questions in the question box. It was very much controlled by, the narrative is being controlled by them. It's not consultation. It's It's you ask us a question and we'll tell you why, or we'll justify it with an answer of why we think it's appropriate that we do this. And it's, everyone's just feeling hopeless, and TGS, this drop-ins that happened, from Portland along the coast down to Tasmania. Everyone's asking, well, why are you even here? You're telling us things we already know. You could just put this information on your website. If it was consultation, you would let us be asking or giving our feedback. And like you said, they didn't write anything down. They're not concerned at all. It's box ticking. The federal member for Corangamite, Libby Coker, even requested a meeting or a drop-in session on the Surf Coast in Torquay, which they declined. And she's also said that it worries her that a company like TGS can't even adequately consult with community. So how can we trust that they're going to go and do the right thing out in the ocean where everyone's really concerned about this? So yeah, it's very poor. A little bit on the seismic blasting itself. What sort of impacts does that, or tell us a bit about the impacts that has on commercial fisheries?
So I always try to sort of break it down into, because they always want to simplify things, and they always, as I said earlier, their starting premise is an implication that this is a benign activity. Okay, so the only impact of this activity that they're initially willing to acknowledge is that, whilst we're doing this, you guys can't fish there. So if we impact on your fishing, then we will give you some sort of compensation. Okay, but that compensation is only the direct impact of a fisher not being able to fish where they otherwise would have chosen to fish. What they don't understand, and behind that is their argument, which is pretty funny. But you can fish anywhere, so just go and fish somewhere else. It's like, well, fishers, whilst fishers can fish, over vast areas, fishers' effort is spread because of that. So if you displace a group of fishers and they go and fish on top of where other fishers are fishing, you actually put increased fishing pressure into localized areas, which can be detrimental for the long-term stock managements of the resources in that area. So they don't even want to acknowledge that. They also don't want to acknowledge the long-term impact or the cumulative impact. So the way the regulatory regime exists at the moment, every single activity is assessed on the basis that there has never been another activity, there will never be another activity, and that this is the only activity that's ever going to occur in this place, full stop. So there is no obligation for any proponent to take into account the impact of multiple, surveys over time. There is no obligation to do that. There's no obligation to look at the bigger picture of overlapping surveys across space and time. As we all realise, the oceanic environment is a very complicated place. The trophic interactions of species up and down the food chain is very complicated, and there's no fences out there. The life in the ocean is neither static nor does it not move around. So when they are having an impact, that impact might not be seen today. It might not be seen next season. It might take 10 years for the impact of what happens today to be revealed. And when that impact starts to be revealed, it is almost impossible to tie back an impact 10 years down the track to a survey 10 years ago, because their argument to us has always arrogantly been, you've got your civil rights. If you want to sue us in 10 years' time, take us to court. Good luck. That's literally what we've been told in our face. It's interesting though, isn't it? We as an industry have pushed very hard for more science. For years and years, there's been a lack of science that actually fully reveal the impact of seismic blasting. So the actual damage, what does it do? There were some estimates of the damage that they thought they were doing, But what they would do is they would extrapolate that at a level which implied that it was insignificant over time. So one of their favorite tricks is they get a nice picture of the globe and they put a little red dot and say, that's all we're doing. We're just doing this bit here, right? There's a whole world out there. You know, of course, it doesn't make any impact on a global level, on a species level, but it's just not true. It's just not true. So we now know that seismic blasting it will kill scallops, not immediately, but it'll weaken their immune system such that within 3 months they're basically dead. We know that it blows holes in the zooplankton, in the water column, and we now have scientific proof that the estimates that they originally thought about how much damage, you know, the range of that damage is not only tenfold what they originally estimated, but possibly more, because even at that level, they haven't tested the full boundaries of what that might look like. And don't forget, all the zooplankton in the water column is not just, you know, the krill that the whales eat. It's also the early embryonic stages of many of our species, like rock lobster. Rock lobster has a very complicated life cycle. Rock lobster larvae floats on the ocean and goes through 7 or 8 planktonic stages before it finally settles on a reef as a tiny little rock lobster called a purulus. So all these critters are floating around in the water column. Now, if they run backwards and forwards and blast, you know, holes in all of this and kill them all, you know, what impact is that having? Now, the trouble is we don't know. Now, at least they have to acknowledge that, yes, it does have an impact. It does have that damage. And it's like on the adult lobsters, you know, we now know that the seismic blasting, and this is in scientific terms, I'm not making these terms up, it does significant and permanent damage. What it does, the rock lobsters have balance organs like our ears, and inside are like little hairs called statocysts. The seismic blasts break them off. They break those off. So the adult lobsters lose their balance, and that's not something they recover through molts. It's actually permanent damage. So therefore, a lobster that is on its back that has had that damage will take much longer to right itself. You know, so it's actually significantly impaired in its operation in its natural environment. How does that impact that lobster in terms of evading predators? How does it impact that lobster in terms of its ability to mate? We don't know. But what we do know now is this damage is being done. But they're still operating on the premise that, yeah, but it doesn't matter. You know, it was like, hang on, who says it doesn't matter? You know, you can't say it doesn't matter. The trouble is, we won't necessarily see evidence of that, of the impact of that damage through our catch rates. So we have a catch rate. Every single pot lift, you know, we're out there. Everything is measured. So every single pot lift is measured, and what they call CPUE, catch per unit effort, is used as a proxy for biomass. So you know, that's the first stage in the stock evaluation, is to actually understand that. Well, if in 10 years' time there is some sort of evidence of an impact to the CPUE, how do you tie that back to a survey that was done 10 years ago, when at the same time we have been investing as an industry heavily in rebuilding the biomass? So we've reduced our catch rates in order to leave more fish in the water to actually rebuild the stocks. We have never been as successful in doing that as the scientific modelling told us we would be. So something's pulling the rug out from under our feet. I wonder what that is, right? But the trouble is, at face value, our CPUs are actually going up. So the oil and gas industry looks at that and says, what are you complaining about? Fishing's getting better. It's like, well, yeah, but it actually should be better than better, right? So, you know, we keep investing to build the stock at the same time as they're buggering it up. You know, well, shouldn't they be paying for that? You know, and yet we're left to carry the can. You know, it's pretty bad.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. There's really, it seems like, you know, from every angle, there's no real regard for any other industry. And TGS have said throughout this process that they're working to coexist with commercial fishing in the Otway Basin, but it's just, you know, it's just not true. It's not what, you know, they don't have anyone else's best interests. And I guess, the next question is, how would you feel if this project is approved despite things like, cherry picking science, the massive pushback from the community? How would you feel if NOPSEMA turn around and just approve this project because they believe that TGS has met the requirements?
I can't imagine that it would happen. I mean, I can, but I think what's interesting, if you look at the early diagrams of what they originally wanted to blast, the western end of the survey area went across into South Australian waters. Well, guess what happened? There was sufficient pushback from South Australian politicians because of the pressure applied from people in South Australia. If you have a look at that now, inexplicably, the end point is a hard line. It doesn't go into South Australia anymore.
Yeah.
So there's no reason for the rest of it to be knocked out as well. I really believe that with the right exposure and enough people who understand just the facts of the matter, we do not need this to be done. This needs to be stopped. And I think the other thing that people need to realise is that these companies are getting desperate, right? Seismic blasting is actually being stopped around the world. Australia is becoming a dumping ground for the stranded assets that are these seismic blasting vessels. These are massive, expensive ships. They need to be working somewhere. The companies that own them and run them couldn't give a flying fuck where they are or what they're doing. These are assets that need to be working. So Australia has become a magnet for this effort to push for more work for these vessels, because other countries are saying, no more of that here, no more of that there. So the pressure from the oil and gas industry is only going to increase while our government doesn't have the balls to actually say enough is enough. So it's not just about this survey. It is actually about having the balls to say enough is enough. The science says we don't need it. We don't need it. The government's own agencies say that. And we, the people, don't want it. So if these politicians want to be voted back in next time, they better bloody start listening. That's my view.
Yep, absolutely. That's a really good point. And there's an election coming up soon. And so, it is really important that people like in our communities keep putting on the pressure, so politicians know that this is how everyone feels and that we won't let this be a dumping ground for all this activity. So, it could be it could be turned into an election issue, and I really hope it does if there's enough pressure put on. Is there anything else that you want to add? Anything else you think I haven't asked? We've spoken about so much, so I'm sure.
Yeah, look, I think we've covered a lot. The key takeaways for me are, I think Ocean's doing a great job. I think Ocean has really filled a gap, which was that bridge to broader community awareness. It just wasn't something that we were getting any traction with through the fishing sector because we're so small, and fishermen aren't generally the best communicators. They're self-selected individuals who are happy spending time at sea, not advocating on their own behalf. So, I think Ocean has done a really good job in that. Ocean needs to stick to the facts and not get drawn into too much emotive stuff, because there's two games that have to be played. There's winning the hearts and minds of the people. So that's where the emotive stuff lives, and there's a place for that. But when it comes to head-on engagement with oil and gas industry proponents and NOPSEMA and the government, the more we can refer to the cold, hard facts, the more powerful the arguments are, because they're not in dispute, And what's good now, in the past, there was a lack of facts. We've actually got more facts now, and I think the whole general awareness of the need or not for more fossil fuels is actually it's helpful that all of this is coming together, and it's becoming a very, very strong story. So the ability of proponents and politicians to justify this activity is getting on thinner and thinner and thinner ice. There will be a breaking point. The flags can be turned. And I think getting people to understand those facts and voice their concerns through their own communities, through their own elected representatives, and into the halls of Canberra, I think collectively we can do it. I really believe it. And I think everyone should believe it, because, in this case, I think, we will prevail.
Yeah, incredible. It's always good to end on a little bit of hope there. So it's nice to know that you feel hopeful about how this is moving forward. And I do too. I just feel really hopeful in how community has come together over the last 6 months over these issues, and how passionate people are now about, looking after our local environment. And because of the broader impacts that we know of, it's so important that we do, but it's really nice to see people waking up to that. So yeah, thanks heaps, Marcus, for having a chat today. It's been really good to hear your insight and, expertise and experience into this issue. And yeah, I hope you have a good rest of your day and good.
Indeed. And look, keep up the good work. You guys are doing a great job. And engaging with young people. Young people are the future. It's just so important that the people for whom the future is theirs need to know what's going on, because it's going to impact them. And
Yeah.
But I think it's fertile ground now. Like there's a lot of broader understanding of environmental impacts. But also our ability to do something about it. We can turn things around, but we just need to have the will to do it. So, keep up the great work. You guys are doing a great job.